I'm delighted to have Eddie Hearn with me ahead of such a massive week. Eddie, before we get into Usyk Chisora, how are you feeling?
I'm all right. Yeah, I'm probably 3 weeks now since I was diagnosed with COVID. I'm back in the saddle. You know, I think learned a lot about it. Didn't feel great when I had it. Probably still not 100% now, but 90% and good to go. Obviously, I retested and I was positive originally after 2 weeks, then I was negative. So I'm all clear, and I think like I said, just educates you, in a way where we're so involved with it, with the testing capacity, obviously with the boxing, with the darts as well and the snooker. And, my dad got it as well, which was quite amusing because, someone on Twitter pointed out, blimey, Barry Hearn gave his son an empire and his son gave Barry Hearn COVID. So I'm glad he made it through the other side. We've been joking about that. And he was more poorly than me. And I think it just shows you the severity of the virus, to be honest with you, with people that are more vulnerable. And I think that's what we know. We know that, and it's still my view that young people, healthy people should be allowed to go and do their thing now, but the vulnerable should be shielded. And, everyone's got their ideas, haven't they? But the truth is, as long as everyone can stay healthy, then that's the most important thing. But I've missed 2 fight weeks. I've missed 2 bubbles. And I was like, I can't miss Usyk Chisora. I can't do it. So I missed the Buatsi bubble. I missed the Ritson bubble. And I've really missed that environment, because this week's going to be crazy. So many huge characters, so many massive fights on the card as well. So I can't wait to get back in there on Wednesday and be part of a huge build-up.
When you're going to get back here as I go, hey, there he is. He's back. Back, everyone.
No Zooms.
Yeah, I know. I actually hate the Zooms. But let's go on to the main event because people can't wait. Is this a real test to see if Usyk has the heavyweight power?
I think this is just the perfect test for Usyk. I mean, look, Alexander Usyk is one of the greatest fighters of all time. Of all time. We were lucky to have one here last September or last August in Vasily Lomachenko. Usyk has already boxed here in a massive pay-per-view against Tony Bellew. Now, he did everything at cruiserweight. He become the undisputed champion, the Ring Magazine champion. He's a pound-for-pound king. And now he moves up to heavyweight. Now, we know that, in the amateurs, he did make some moves in the World Series of Boxing. He boxed Joe Joyce and these kind of guys. So he has operated at that level. But with the small gloves on and, the 12 rounds, this is different. And David Haye and Derek Chisora, and I have to say, I love Del Boy, but I love him because he's a great character and he's a great fighter. But the work that he has put in for this camp, I've not seen anything like it. I mean, David Haye has done such a great job because Derek's not the easiest of characters, to keep on the horse. But David Haye has done such a great job on the team there. They have put every single ounce into this and they all truly believe they're going to win. What we know about Alexander Usyk is genius, right? Amazing footwork, right? Punch selection, timing, mental capacity. What we don't know about him is how tough he is under heavyweight firepower. When he boxed Chaz Witherspoon last October, there were a few signs that he didn't like, what was coming back. This guy was 18 and a half stone. He was nowhere near as good as Derek Chisora. He was nowhere near as fast as Derek Chisora. And I know Derek's not, Anthony Joshua in terms of speed, but, he's still a rapid fire heavyweight. And there are a lot of questions for Usyk to answer at heavyweight. But what we do know is the guy is an absolute genius. He will go down, I'm sure, as one of the greatest fighters of our generation. So this will be, in my opinion, one of the greatest wins from a British fighter of all time, if Chisora pulls it off. Certainly, arguably, one of the greatest heavyweight wins by a British fighter of all time, because Chisora is the underdog. But these closed door environments, Michael, they throw up some weird stuff. Usyk said to me a few times, "Oh, is there a crowd? Is there going to be a crowd?" So, no. How does he feel about that? Last week, he saw Vasily Lomachenko, his close friend, almost like a brother, who's trained by his father, Papachenko, who's almost like a father to Alexander Usyk, get beat. These are deep people, deep thinkers. So you have to say that the momentum in the last few weeks is with Chisora, but he's not of the league of Alexander Usyk. But if he can force the pressure, it's so transparent what he needs to do. He needs to find a way on Alexander Usyk's chest and do not stop punching. Make it horrible, make it dirty, whip him in to the body, to the arms, to the head, anywhere you need to. But it's easier said than done. Usyk's footwork is so good. And it's going to be painful for Chisora. He's going to get pinged everywhere, from angles that he didn't know existed. But he's just got to keep at it. The noise in there, all you're going to hear is David Haye. Do this, Derek. Yes, Derek. Yes, Derek. And then you're going to hear the Usyk team. What's that, Usyk? What's that? This fight is so important. And everything's on the line on Saturday.
It also could elevate Derek back up to that higher echelon, couldn't it? After the defeats he had against Dillian. But all of a sudden, he wins this one and he's back at the top, isn't he?
Well, I mean, when you talk about those two fights with Dillian, the first fight could have gone either way, right? One of the best heavyweight fights I've ever seen. The second fight, he was ahead on points going into the 11th round. He got chinned and knocked out by a monstrous left hook. Usyk doesn't punch as hard as Dillian Whyte. That's unquestionable. David Haye is lobbying Paco Valcazar from the WBO to say, hang on, Alexander Usyk is the mandatory for Anthony Joshua. If we win, we take that spot. And really, they should. Usyk is number one heavyweight in the world. If Chisora wins, he should be number one heavyweight in the world. So, for Chisora, it's just a remarkable turnaround from his career. I mean, when you go back to, the Carlos Takam victory was unreal. When he sparked Carlos Takam, even Spielberg against Southpaw, everything's that fight with Paul, just everything sort of led him to this point. And I don't know if he's going to win. But what I do know is he will give you everything, trying. Everything. And as a fan, as a manager in David Haye and a promoter in me, that's all you can ever ask for a fighter. But just what I'm saying to you is understand this for people listening to this, watching at home. This guy has put every drop of his soul into this camp. He will leave everything in the ring for you on Saturday night to try and pull off one of the greatest upsets of all time by a British fighter.
If Usyk does win, Eddie, where do we go from there in terms of the WBO? Is there some kind of deadline when they can get this mandatory sorted out? Because
yeah, I mean, look, I like to be as transparent as I can, and the truth is that if Anthony Joshua beats Kubrat Pulev, he wants to fight Tyson Fury. I mean, I don't see any fight getting in the way of that. What we do know is that if Alexander Usyk wins on Saturday night and Joshua beats Pulev, the ruling states that Joshua should fight Usyk next. Now, if Joshua beats Pulev, he will apply probably to the WBO to say, I would like to fight Tyson Fury for the undisputed title. The WBO can say yes or no. If they say no, then we go to Alexander Usyk and say, look, will you let this fight take place in April? Maybe we'll vacate after that, because that's the key. I really want the AJ Fury fight to be for the undisputed title. I've seen comments from their side saying the belts aren't important. The belts are important, and they are important to Anthony Joshua. He hasn't accumulated all these belts. He hasn't paid all these sanction fees over the years just to throw them away. The dream has always been to be undisputed, but we also respect Alexander Usyk's position as mandatory challenger. And AJ would like to fight Usyk as well. He thinks it's an amazing challenge. He thinks Usyk's a great fighter. So, but the key for us is, beat Kubrat Pulev on December 12th and then fight Tyson Fury. So we'll see where that leads us with the WBO.
We'll get more into that in a bit. I know you're really excited about this card on Saturday, and it's a really good card, isn't it? You've got Lee Selby, Savannah Marshall. Tell us more. Tell us why we should be watching.
It's a massive card. I mean, you always get this stage where, and I understand that it's a pay-per-view event and, you're always going to get your people saying, pay-per-view. But all I can tell you is that we have no crowd. Even with a crowd at a sold-out O2, this fight was already pay-per-view in May. Right now we have no crowd. So the fighters have taken a big risk on this pay-per-view. The early pay-per-view buyers are looking phenomenal, but the card is really, really good. It's got a little bit of everything. It's got the European Cruiserweight Championship with Belfast Tommy McCarthy going for the title against Belgium's Lagoon. It's got a little Commonwealth women's fight between Amy Timlin and Skelly early on in the night. It's going to come to you probably on Facebook. We've got Kash Farouk as well, one of the top young bantamweights in the world. And then we go on to the main card, like I said, the European Cruiserweight Championship. You've got a fascinating heavyweight fight between Dave Allen and Chris Lovejoy. I mean, this guy, Chris Lovejoy, he's 19-0 with 19 knockouts. He's found his way into the top 15 in the world. He's about 6'7" and about 300 pounds, right? I have no idea how good he is. I know he can punch. But then you've got Dave Allen. I have no idea how good Dave Allen is either, to be honest with you. All I know is Lovejoy's saying 100% he's knocking out Dave Allen inside 3 rounds. Like, it's a given. But for Dave Allen, he forces himself in the world top 15 if he can beat Lovejoy. So that's a big heavyweight fight over 10 rounds. A fight I'm really looking forward to is Savannah Marshall against Hannah Rankin. You know, we were devastated when we lost that fight a couple of weeks ago when Peter Fury tested positive for COVID. This is a big world championship fight, a middleweight world championship as well. You know, something that we haven't seen as much of for the new generation of women fighters. Katie Taylor at lightweight, Chantel Cameron at light welterweight, Terry Harper and Natasha Jonas at super feather. These are bigger girls who can really punch. It's England against Scotland. It's a big grudge match. And the winner of this, if Savannah Marshall can win this, she'll go on and fight Clarissa Shields in a massive fight. But Rankin, bang up for this. And also an absolute brilliant fight, which means so much now because of what happened a couple of weeks ago, is Lee Selby against George Kambosos. It's a final eliminator for the IBF World Lightweight title. It will be Teofimo Lopez's first mandatory defense of his unified championships. So, it's a massive opportunity for them. Kambosos talks a great game. He's a million miles an hour. He calls himself ferocious. Selby, we know, former world champion, great fight. But up at lightweight, he's going to have it all to do against Kambosos. Brilliant, brilliant fight. We're going to be coming at you from around 5 p.m. on Saturday night. So you're going to have about 7 hours of live boxing. As we know, there's nowhere else to go other than your sofa at the moment. So Halloween special, get your grub in, your beers, and 7 hours of solid championship boxing that's got everything. Like I said, women's boxing, a world championship fight, a European cruiserweight fight, big heavyweight fight, final eliminator for the unified new star of boxing. And of course, the main event. It's a massive night.
Yes, great you bring up Selby, because I was actually going to mention a comment Floyd Mayweather made last week. And I have to say, Eddie, I agreed with him. I want to know what you thought. He said there's too many belts in boxing. And it made me think about the franchise belt. And I always think franchise, Ed, is a bit like undefeated. And, I get, but Lomachenko's now lost that belt. Do we have to assess it at some point and say, do we have too many belts in boxing?
We do. I mean, that's a given. And you look at the UFC model, which we're all very envious of, which is one promotional company, if you like, and one belt. And that's where I want to get to in boxing. It's going to take a lot of work, but we're putting the blueprint together for that. And, it's something that we're going to be pushing hard for in 2021 as we continue to expand. But what we do have to understand, belts do matter. These governing bodies are steeped in history. These fighters that, other fighters look up to and their role models and their heroes, they've seen them with the green and gold WBC belt. So we can't forget that. The franchise situation for me was a terrible move from the WBC. And I love Maurizio Sulaiman. He's a friend of mine. But I have to just be honest, the problem with it is they're the untouchables. And we can't have that many barriers to greatness. With Devin Haney, I asked him, what do you want to do? He says, I want to fight Vasily Lomachenko and I want to win the WBC world title. So we spent a long time going down that route, fighting eliminators, fighting for titles, until finally we got a final eliminator to become the mandatory for Vasily Lomachenko. Brilliant. He stopped Abdullayev, the Russian. All of a sudden, yes. So we go to the WBC convention to lobby that please order that mandatory. Haney wants Lomachenko. And then the top ranks say, no, make him franchise champion. All of a sudden, they make him franchise champion. They make Devin Haney world champion. Then you get the critics on Devin Haney saying, well, you gave the world title. We didn't want to be given the world title. He wanted to beat the pound for pound number one. That's what he wanted to do. And listen, Teofimo Lopez ended up doing that. So congratulations to him. But Devin Haney was striving for greatness. He never asked to be given anything. He chose to take the biggest test in boxing, as a lot of these young guys are doing, which is great. But, it's like Canelo Alvarez. He's franchise champion. You have to give these young fighters, these young lions, the opportunity to try and achieve greatness and chase these guys down. You know, we need competitive mandatories. And I know mandatories are a pain for big champions. Listen, I wish sometimes AJ didn't have to have a mandatory, but it's part and parcel of maintaining your position as a champion. So for me, you know, I don't think it's good for boxing at all. And, you know, I hope that they can put something in place, like, for instance, with Devin Haney, if he beats Gamboa in a couple of weeks, where they will say Haney has to fight Lopez now. That I don't mind that kind of situation. Super champion, you know, if you do something outrageous, all right, okay, I'm not mad about it, but don't let us, we can't touch you. You know, that's not right, that's not fair, and that doesn't give other people a chance to achieve greatness.
Tyson Fury, have you got a little eye on what he's going to do, or who he's going to choose for his domestic fight around December?
Well, I mean, the most important thing is that both fighters win in December. I think the good news on that is that Tyson Fury is not going to fight anyone of significant note. And listen, he's coming off a big win against Deontay Wilder. If he takes an easy touch in December, which he looks like he's going to, I don't think you can criticise him for that. But we got a real fight on our hands. You know, we can't take our eyes off Kubrat Pulev. He's a top 5 heavyweight, mandatory challenger. You know, he's only one loss against Vladimir Klitschko. You know, big puncher, great technician. So we got to be focusing on what we're doing. I hope Fury, I hope he picks an easy fight in December, you know, so just get those wins and then let's get it on in 21.
In your head and in your heart, assuming Tyson Fury wins his December fight and AJ wins his fight against Pulev, when would you like their first fight to be next year, and where?
Well, there's going to be 2. So, you know, you break them up into probably May, June, and then November, December. You know, April, May, June, and November, December, basically. I think, you know, it talks about where, and of course, they're 2 British heavyweight world champions. And if one of those fights at least didn't take place in the UK, it would be a shame. But, you know, I know ultimately people think it's my decision, but it's really not. You know, we will take all the offers that will come from all around the world and present them to both teams and both fighters. Ultimately, normally, the biggest offer wins in sport, and in particularly in a sport as brutal as boxing. But I know that if you said to Tyson, you said to AJ, where do you want this fight to take place? They would both say the UK. So, you know, there's a lot of things to overcome. And, you know, I saw Frank Warren's comments about, you know, the government should put up the money for that fight. I think in the world we're living at the moment, I think the government should be spending their money on more important things, you know, to do with survival of life. But I understand what he's saying, because a lot of these governments have funds to bring major sporting events to their countries. And that's why you see big fights or big events going to Saudi Arabia or Abu Dhabi for the UFC last weekend, or China, or, you know, wherever it may be. So you have that problem that there's going to be a number of countries bidding for the biggest fight in boxing.
And maybe does it come into account as well about the crowd situation we might have?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, we need that to come back, because all these countries will be bidding. And, you know, if we're going to make a run at the UK, we need to be able to have 90,000 at Wembley. You know, we need to be able to fill up stadiums in the Middle East or in the Far East or wherever those bids are coming from. And those bids won't be the same if we can't get fans through the door. You know, and everybody doesn't matter what sport you're working in at the moment, everybody's pushing and hoping and waiting for the return of crowds. But for me, you know, in my mindset and my strategy for our business right now, I'm just presuming that won't be till next year. You know, I hope it is, but, you know, we have to make sure that we're in a position and we have a model in place to continue creating live sports events regardless of the crowd.
What's your view on Deontay Wilder, Eddie? Because we've not heard from him. You've dealt with Shelley Finkel before and his people. In your opinion, what's going on?
I don't know. It's a very good question. You know, I'm baffled, to be honest with you. I mean, I can only think back to when AJ lost to Andy Ruiz. You know, I remember going to see him the next morning. I don't believe there was a day that went past from June the 1st to December when he defeated Andy Ruiz in a rematch that he didn't think about getting his revenge and becoming world champion once more. And the obligation on me You know, despite Ruiz trying to renege on that deal, despite his team trying to pull fast ones, you know, the obligation was all on me. So I had to fight tooth and nail. Cost me a lot of money in the courts as well, with the lawyers, sorry. And I just would not let AJ down because I knew how much he wanted it. Here, you know, and AJ didn't come out and say too much other than I want the rematch, and, you know, and this is what I'd like to hear from Deontay Wilder. But listen, Mike, he's his own man. You know, if this guy has all of a sudden earned his money and he's going to walk off into the sunset, good luck to him. It's a dangerous sport. You know, you need to get your money and get out of there, but you also need your pride and your legacy. You know, that's key as well. And for Wilder, I don't know any other fighter that wouldn't just be thinking, I want that rematch. But I want to hear it. You know, like you say, he's gone missing. And for Shelley Finkel, you know, for Bob Arum and those guys to sit there and say, the contract's expired. I mean, what sort of contract was this? And we're coming off a global pandemic. You know, the force majeure would cover them in that respect. But surely, if they weren't out of contract, Shelley Finkel would be taking legal action. So I don't know. It's all really weird. You know, the good news is I'm not bothered about that. All I know is that Wilder's missed the boat. He ain't going to get a shot at the world title till 2022 and onwards. Because we're going to have our 2 fights next year if we beat Kubrat Pulev. That's the belts tied up there for 2 years. And I don't know. It's very, very strange. But listen, I wish him all the best. And maybe he's done. You know, and you wouldn't hold it against him. You know, good luck to him. Well, as long as he's happy in his life. But I just don't understand that, you know, the situation with Shelley and the contract and how they've not been across this. But, you know, it's their business. And, you know, for us, it's good news because it frees up the opportunity. And like I said, Tyson can have an easy fight in December rather than fighting Deontay Wilder.
Is it sort of penny for Dillian's thoughts sometimes if Tyson does take a so-called easier fight when Dillian's tried and fought so hard for 2 odd years to try and get a WBC shot, someone all of a sudden gets the shot out of nowhere? Or is that just...
I think you can't look back, you know, you can't look back on stuff like that in boxing or in your life, you know, if this or what if that would have happened. The truth is I lost to Alexander Povetkin. You know, this has got to be his mindset. I have to beat him on November 21. That's all that matters. And if I do, I'll be in a great position to challenge for the world title next year. But, you know, as I said, it's gone from a fight that could hold the key to fighting for the World Heavyweight Championship that could be a fight that holds the key to Dillian Whyte's career on November 21. So, you know, you just got to keep focused on what you can control and don't worry about, you know, what happened and what ifs.
You were very vocal in the Terry O'Connor incident with Lewis Ritson's fight, and, you know, rightly so. And since then, he has been cleared. Give us your view on everything now and just how that's.
You know what? It's so difficult because I love, you know, I stand by my fighters and the fighters that are loyal to me, and it's hard to speak out in a fight where I have a fighter in Lewis Ritson and I have to tell people that I thought he lost, right? But if I don't do it, then I'm kidding myself and I'm kidding the fans. So I see some people criticize me about saying, oh, even his Eddie, you know, Lewis Ritson's promoter's not backing him. Mate, I'll back Lewis Ritson. You know, like I said, if you're loyal to me, mate, I ain't going nowhere. I'll fight for you till the end. But I watched it at home with my dad, and I didn't think he won the fight. And the Terry O'Connor scorecard was, in my opinion, horrendous. Now, where I do feel for Terry O'Connor, and listen, I even tweeted, said, if that was a mobile phone, he should be removed. And it clearly wasn't a mobile phone, which is great news, by the way. Great news. But the problem is with scoring is the subjective argument allows you to always get away with it. Do you know what I mean? So, okay, Terry, come in and explain how Lewis Ritson won this fight by 6 rounds. Well, look, I felt he was the aggressor and that's how I score a fight. And, you know, a lot of the punches were on the gloves and, you know, but when you get a fight that most people had Vasquez winning by anywhere between 2 and I think Matt Macklin's card was 8 or something like that. How do you get the swings? Now, this is the thing that concerns me the most is the lack of consistency of scoring. I don't see how you can have a swing of 4 or 5 rounds, let alone a swing of, if you have Matt Macklin scoring that card, which is, look, it's an unofficial Sky card. And listen, Macklin and you boys always get the stick. Oh, you're always scoring it for Sky fighters. Here you have an instance where he's got him losing, 10-2. So 8 rounds to 6 rounds. It's a 14-round swing on a card. How? That doesn't make sense. So, and there's never any doubt of corruption or untoward behaviour. It's for me, it has to be poor scoring. But I don't think you can just use the argument and say, well, it's subjective. If you're the board of control, and listen, again, I back the board all day long. I think they do a great job. It's a very difficult job they have on their hands. But you can't just say, all right, well, that's your version of how you scored it. Okay. Because no one scored it like that. There wasn't one person in the world that scored that fight like that. Maybe other than Lewis Ritson's trainer. But so, I don't know. It's difficult. But the problem we have is, it's a problem for the sport. Listen, it's a problem for me. Because I saw it last week. It's like, I'll pick up Twitter. And it's like, Eddie, you're a joke. It's like, I really don't select these judges, guys. It's a thing called the British Boxing Board, but it still looks bad for the sport, and people will lose trust in the sport or lose hope in the sport if there's continuously bad decisions. It's a bit like VAR. If all of a sudden VAR's throwing up some shockers, all of a sudden it's like, oh, do you know what? I can't bother with this sport anymore. It's a joke. This is the fans' kind of mentality. So we just got to be careful. But judges have to be accountable. The good news is that they called him in. They asked him to explain the scorecard. That's a good thing. That's a step in the right direction. But for me, it was unexplainable.
I'm remembering the Pursoon-Taylor 1 fight where some of us had Pursoon and some of us had Taylor. It was a coin toss for so many.
Yeah.
That one, to be fair, Taylor answered all those questions second time round. It just felt this one, and even as you say yourself, you even said it. I think there's is there any way we can do better scoring, or is there another way of doing it? I don't know. Is there an answer to it?
I just think that, sometimes you talk about Taylor Pursoon 1, one at it, 1 round here, 2 rounds there. When there's a fight where you think he's won it by 2 rounds, you think he's won it by 2, okay, I get it. And that's why I felt like to be vocal, to come out and give my honest opinion. Because a lot of times, in a close fight, you can give your opinion and people, but, look at Vasily Lomachenko against Teofimo Lopez. One judge, I think, gave Vasily 1 round. 1 round. He won 4 rounds 1,000,000%. There was nothing to judge. Now, did he win 5 or 6? I don't know, maybe. But he definitely won 4 rounds in that fight, and there's another situation where it's almost like, and by the way, I know that there's always a talk of home fighters and stuff like that, but I've been on the road with fighters where we've got, Paul Smith against Arthur Abraham 1 was a great example, where we got in the ring and we're like, oh, do you reckon we've got it? And it was close, right? And it's like 6 rounds, 7 rounds. And it's like, and you end up thinking to yourself, I might as well not even bothered. Miguel Vasquez is probably thinking, I shouldn't have even bothered. I've worked my nuts off in there. And same with Vasily Lomachenko. Wow, what they have. They scored it before, the famous saying, scored it before your scorecards were already done. Should have just gave them to him before the first round. I think the problem is as well, is where you have, I know the British Boxing Board of Control like to have British judges and stuff like that, but everybody, they know these fighters. Listen, Terry O'Connor might be a Lewis Ritson fan. Not as in, he's got posters up of him on his wall, but he likes the way he fights. He comes forward, he always presses the action, he's always entertaining. Do you know what I mean? And then you might get another judge who likes the classic, crafty boxing of Miguel Vasquez. But you have to have a blank canvas in judging. You can't sit down and go, oh, it's Lewis Ritson. I like Lewis Ritson. Do you know what I mean? That's why sometimes the international judges are better, because they have a blank canvas. But there's no school for judging, But I just think as long as we can make sure they're accountable and they have to justify their decisions. Another problem as well, and I think this is the right decision from the board, is you can't talk to the judges, right? So as in the media. So you can't get Terry O'Connor on a Zoom this week and say, Can you just talk us through what you saw in that fight? And it's probably the right decision, to be fair, because then it becomes a circus. But it's always the board protecting their officials, which I respect as well, by the way. But at the same time, you know, if you do a bad job, right, you're off. You know what I mean? If I do a bad job, all right, the company's in trouble. Or if someone who works for me does a bad job, you know, you're accountable in whatever you do. So if you perform poorly, you have to be accountable. And in my opinion, he performed poorly in that fight.
I know you got a flight to catch, so I'll be quick. What's the rest of your week looking like now?
So I'm speaking at Cambridge University tomorrow night, which is I feel like it would be bad of me, Bridgie, not to get a plug in for my new book, Relentless, which launches later this week. And I'm speaking at Cambridge tonight, and then we're back in the bubble first thing Wednesday morning. I can't wait. I can't wait to see Usyk. I can't wait for the press conferences. I can't wait for the banter. I can't wait for the aggro. It's just a massive night on Saturday. It's a Halloween special. And I'm really proud to get this one done with no crowd, because this has been brutal, and I have to give credit to both fighters, because they've made it happen. They want to do this. They want to go to war on Saturday. And like I said, there's not a lot to do at the moment. You can't get yourselves out and about to late pubs and nightclubs and parties. So get your seat ready, get it warm, and get ready for 7 hours of fantastic championship boxing on Saturday.
It's a proper Halloween fight as well. He could be in for a real
fight. Two great characters. And like I said, you got Usyk's quite eerie, isn't he? And Chisora's just a lunatic. But they will give you everything on Saturday night. So make sure you enjoy it.